I always thought marrying into a wealthy family meant respect. But the day my husband's relatives handed me a tray and said, "Hurry up, the real family is arriving," I realized something horrifying. I wasn't their daughter-in-law. I was their servant. What they didn't know was that the paper sitting quietly inside my handbag that night would soon expose a truth that would burn their entire legacy to the ground. The Grants owned half the transport depots in the region, and everyone in town treated them like royalty. When Daniel proposed, people congratulated me like I'd won a lottery ticket. "Lucky girl," they'd say. "You're marrying into money." But the first time I walked through the looming oak doors of their mansion as Daniel's wife, I felt something cold crawl down my spine. Margaret Grant, my mother-in-law, looked me up and down like I was dripping mud on her marble floors. "You're late," she said. I wasn't. He just needed a reason. Before I could respond, she shoved a stack of porcelain plates into my hands. "Set the table. Quickly. And make sure the silverware is polished. We want the place presentable before the men come down." Presentable. As if I was the mess. Daniel stood behind her, helpless, giving me that look again. The same look he always gave me when his family treated me like I didn't belong. "Just please don't make this a big deal." So I swallowed my pride, walked toward the dining room and did what I always did. I watched. I listened. I remembered. Because every insult, every order, every time they pretended not to hear me speak, all of it was building toward a moment I already knew was coming. The moment when they'd learn that the quiet, obedient girl they ordered around like household staff was actually holding the legal detonator to their entire empire. And the first spark, it would ignite at this very dinner. Dinner at the Grant Mansion was less a meal and more a performance, a show in which everyone had a role except me. Margaret directed the staff like a general. Eleanor, my sister-in-law, sat at the head of the table even though she wasn't the eldest. She liked being seen. Daniel became a version of himself I barely recognized. Silent, stiff, obedient to them in ways he never was with me. That night, while I finished setting the last fork, I heard the whispering start. Eleanor's voice, sharp enough to cut glass, floated across the room. "Honestly, Mother, she should be grateful we let her help. Some girls from her background could never keep up here." Her background. They always said that. Like I was a stray kitten Daniel rescued from an alley. I stepped back, keeping my face neutral even though heat burned in my chest. Margaret sniffed. "She's doing her best. It's simple work. Suits her. Simple work. The same work I had done to pay for my degree. The degree I never mentioned to them. The degree their late father-in-law had discovered, on his own, when he asked me a question about contract clauses months ago. They thought they knew me. They didn't know anything. I carried the serving dishes to the table. Margaret inspected each plate like she expected to find fingerprints or crumbs, something she could use to belittle me. Daniel didn't defend me. He cleared his throat, tried a half-smile in my direction, then lowered his gaze so he wouldn't have to see the disappointment in my eyes. As everyone settled in, I took the chair farthest from the center. The invisible seat. The one meant for people who were part of the family, only when convenient. Then it happened. Margaret tapped her glass for attention. "Before we start, I want to acknowledge Daniel's promotion. Another step toward taking over the company from his father's legacy." A round of applause followed. And then, Margaret turned to me with a smile so thin it could split. "And Amelia, thank you for preparing everything tonight. You may clear dishes as we finish. Not help. Not assist. Clear dishes. Like staff. Like someone beneath them." I felt something inside me shift. Not break, harden. For the first time I didn't lower my eyes. I looked straight at her and held the stare. A small silence rippled across the table. Not because they respected me, but because they weren't used to me reacting at all. Eleanor clicked her tongue. "Oh, come on, Amelia. Don't look at Mother like that. It's just a task. You want to contribute, don't you?" Contribute. As if their entire world wasn't about to be rearranged by something I had already set in motion. I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I simply rose from my chair with slow, deliberate calm and started collecting plates. But inside, a clock was ticking. Because I knew something they didn't. Tomorrow morning, their attorney would be arriving with documents that would redefine the meaning of family business. And the people who treated me like an accessory would finally face the truth. They were standing on a legacy built by a man who trusted me more than anyone at this table. And dinner would be the last time they ever tried to make me feel small. The next morning, the Grant Mansion was buzzing with its usual polished chaos. Staff darted through the halls. Eleanor barked orders she had no authority to give. Margaret circled the dining room, adjusting napkins no one would ever notice. A normal day, for a family that believed nothing could touch them. I stayed quiet, sitting on the edge of the sofa, fingers wrapped around a mug I hadn't sipped. My heart thudded like a slow drum, Not from fear, from anticipation. Because any minute now the doorbell would ring and everything they built on arrogance and entitlement would start to collapse. Daniel came downstairs buttoning his shirt, oblivious. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. He didn't look long enough to question it. Margaret's voice cut across the room. "Amelia, since you're already sitting there doing nothing, make sure the table is set for brunch." The mug in my hands creaked under the pressure of my grip. Doing nothing. After an entire night of doing emotional gymnastics just to stay polite. After years of biting my tongue to keep peace in a place that offered me none. I opened my mouth to respond. But the doorbell rang. A crisp, sharp chime that sliced through the room. Margaret exhaled with annoyance. "Oh, for heaven's sake. Someone get that." Her eyes landed on me. Of course. I stood, smoothing the front of my blouse, grounding myself. This was the moment. I opened the front door. And there he stood. Attorney Jonathan Harris, the Grant family's longtime corporate lawyer. Silver briefcase. Impeccable suit. Calm, unreadable expression. Except when he looked at me, a flicker of recognition and something close to respect. "Good morning, Mrs. Grant," he said with a polite nod. "May I come in?" Mrs. Grant. Not Daniel's wife. Not Amelia, dear. Not her. Just Mrs. Grant, said with the same tone he used for Margaret and the late founder. It was enough to make Margaret pause mid-step. She stormed toward us. "Jonathan? Why are you here unannounced? Is something wrong with the quarterly filings?" Harris stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Shli, no. This is a matter regarding the company's ownership and internal structure." Daniel blinked. "What does that mean?" Harris opened his briefcase slowly, too slowly for Margaret's impatient taste. She tapped her nails furiously against her bracelet. "If this is about dividends, Jonathan." "It's not," he cut in smoothly. "This concerns the execution of Mr. Grant Sr.'s final directives." Silence. Even the staff seemed to freeze. Margaret's voice dropped to a whisper. "The will was settled months ago." Harris shook his head. "There were revisions made after the initial reading. Revisions your husband completed privately. He entrusted me to carry out the final steps once all conditions were met." "Conditions?" Eleanor repeated, eyes narrowing. "What conditions?" Harris turned to me. "Not them. Me." And my stomach fluttered, not with nerves, but with that steady sense of inevitability I'd been carrying for months. "As of 9 a.m. today," Harris announced, "the final transfer of ownership over Grant Industrial Freight is ready to be enacted." Daniel straightened. "Oh, so it's going to Mother, right?" Margaret stepped forward, chin high, already accepting her imaginary crown. But Harris didn't look at her. He didn't look at Daniel. He didn't look at Eleanor. He looked only at me. "Per Mr. Grant Sr.'s legally signed final amendment," he paused, lifting a set of documents from the briefcase with deliberate precision. "The company is to be transferred entirely to his daughter-in-law, Mrs. Amelia Grant." The room didn't just go silent. It went dead. Eleanor laughed. A sharp, incredulous sound. "Him? No, that can't be right. She's not even, She didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning hung in the air. Margaret's face drained of color. Then flushed. Then twisted. "This is absurd," she snapped. "My husband would never bypass his own children, his own blood." Harris adjusted his glasses, unbothered. "I understand this is unexpected. But I have signed documents, audio statements, and sealed instructions that make his intentions unmistakably clear." Daniel turned to me slowly, the realization sinking in. You knew about this?" I didn't look away. "Yes." Margaret clutched the back of a chair like she needed support to stay upright. What condition? What was he waiting for before making this transfer official?" Harris answered calmly. "He wanted proof that Amelia understood the company better than anyone else, and that she had the temperament to lead it. He observed her quietly for months. He told me he admired her integrity and her restraint." The word hung heavy, restraint. All the nights I'd been insulted, dismissed, ordered around. He had seen it. Every moment. And he made his choice accordingly. Margaret stumbled a step backward. Eleanor grabbed her arm. Daniel stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. And the tension in the room shifted, from arrogance to fear. Because in that moment they all realized the truth. The woman they treated like a servant now legally owned the empire that paid for their mansions, their cars, their lifestyle, their pride. And the best part? We hadn't even reached the twist yet. Margaret's reaction didn't come all at once. It arrived in stages, like watching a grand chandelier crack before it falls. First came disbelief, then outrage, then a cold, trembling fear she tried desperately to hide. She slammed her hand onto the table so hard the silverware rattled. This is a mistake. A clerical error. Jonathan, you will fix this. Attorney Harris didn't even blink. With respect, Mrs. Grant, I cannot alter the legally binding wishes of the company's founder. Eleanor stepped forward, pointing at me like I was a stain on her carpet. She doesn't know anything about running a company. She can barely host brunch without embarrassing us. A muscle twitched in my jaw, but I still didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Harris opened another folder. Slowly, like he was presenting evidence in court. Mr. Grant Sr. disagreed, he said. These documents include a summary of private assessments he conducted. Amelia demonstrated better understanding of logistics regulations, contractual loopholes and compliance protocols than any other family member. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. That's impossible. Harris turned to her, his voice steady. During our last quarterly review, you incorrectly categorized 2 subcontractor agreements as exempt under regional law. Amelia corrected your error. Quietly. Eleanor's mouth fell open. Margaret looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. You've been studying the company? Studying. Working. Preparing. But I didn't answer. Harris continued. And Daniel. Daniel straightened, hopeful. Dad trusted me. He said I would take over. He said, Harris interrupted gently, that he hoped you would grow into the role. But he also noted that your decision-making was heavily influenced by family pressure, and that your loyalty to the company could be compromised. Daniel's face went pale. The room felt tight, like all the oxygen had been sucked out but the emotions stayed thick and toxic. Margaret pointed a shaking finger at Harris. You've been manipulated. This girl, must have tricked him somehow. That was it. I finally spoke. My voice wasn't loud, just sharp enough to slice the air. You think I tricked your husband into choosing me? The man you all ignored unless you needed money or approval. Margaret flinched. I stepped closer, each word slow and deliberate. He spoke to me like I was a human being. He asked about my education instead of my family background. He listened when I explained things instead of interrupting to correct me. Eleanor scoffed. So he just decided you should own everything? I met her glare without blinking. No. He never trusted any of you to protect what he built. The room erupted. Daniel grabbed my arm. Amelia, stop. This is my family. I pulled away. Your family treated me like furniture. And the only person who ever looked beyond that is the reason we're having this conversation. Attorney Harris set a fresh document on the table. Mrs. Grant, he said to me, this is the final transfer form. One signature enacts the full ownership transition. The sound that came out of Margaret was half gasp, half growl. She lunged toward the folder. But Harris stepped between us. Touching this document without authorization could be considered an attempt to tamper with corporate filings. Margaret froze. Her eyes darted to the staff watching from the doorway, to Eleanor, whose confidence was evaporating, to Daniel, who looked like a man drowning in the truth. Amelia, he whispered, don't do this. They're still my family. I turned to him slowly. Then they should have acted like a family. A long, fragile silence hung between us. Then I picked up the pen. Margaret let out a scream that didn't sound entirely human. No. You can't, you don't, you are not one of us. My hand didn't even tremble. I signed the document with one smooth stroke. The pen snapped shut. And with that tiny sound the Grant Empire shifted. Away from entitlement, away from arrogance and firmly into my hands. Attorney Harris gathered the papers calmly. As of this moment, he announced, Amelia Grant is the sole legal owner of Grant Industrial Freight. Eleanor collapsed into a chair. Daniel ran a hand down his face, shaking. And Margaret just stood there, staring at me like her entire identity had been ripped apart. I looked at her, really looked at her, and said the words she once spat at me without blinking. Make yourself useful, Margaret. The staff coughed to hide their laughter. Eleanor went rigid with humiliation. And for the first time since entering that house, I wasn't the smallest person in the room. I was the only one standing tall. The mansion, so loud with outrage minutes earlier, fell into a stunned, vibrating silence. For years, I had been the quiet shadow following this family's traditions, their routines, their rules. Now the entire room couldn't stop staring at me, not because I was invisible but because I suddenly mattered more than any of them ever expected. Margaret was the first to move. She reached blindly for a chair, sinking into it like her legs couldn't hold her up. This isn't happening, she whispered. This isn't real. It was the softest I'd ever heard her voice, bare, frightened, stripped of the armor she wore like a second skin. Eleanor stood rigid, arms folded, jaw locked like she was trying not to cry or scream. Daniel paced in slow, tight circles, rubbing his temple as if he could erase what just happened. Amelia, just think, he pleaded. You're emotional. They're emotional. You don't have to make any decisions yet. Let things calm down. Calm down. After years of disrespect, belittling remarks, and being treated like I was an unpaid maid? Well, I had been calm long enough. Attorney Harris handed me a sealed packet. These are the immediate transition documents. Staff authority. Board communication. Access credentials. Everything. Margaret shot to her feet. You can't seriously expect her to run the company. My husband didn't know what he was doing. Harris's expression didn't budge. He knew exactly what he was doing, Margaret. He wanted the company protected from internal sabotage and entitlement. She froze. Sabotage. She knew he was right. She just didn't want to hear it. I walked to the head of the table, the seat Eleanor had always claimed because she felt she deserved it. I pulled the chair out and sat calmly. The energy in the room shifted. From chaos to realization. This was not temporary. This was not symbolic. This was real. Eleanor's voice cracked as she spoke. What are you going to do with the company? Fix it, I said. Starting today. Daniel stopped pacing. Please don't fire my family. I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time I wondered whether he ever truly understood what marriage meant. I'm not firing anyone, I said. Not yet. Margaret let out a shaky breath of relief. However, I continued, everyone in the family will undergo a full performance and compliance review. Their faces died all over again. Eleanor sputtered. A performance review? We're not employees. We're grants. I leaned back in my chair. And now I'm the grant who decides who stays and who goes. Margaret bristled, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. She knew she didn't have the power anymore. Harris cleared his throat softly. There's also the matter of the founder's final interview. Margaret whipped toward him. What interview? Harris set a flash drive on the table. Your husband recorded a statement about his reasons for choosing Amelia. He asked that it be played only after the transfer was complete. The room went still again. Daniel stepped forward, voice small. What did he say? You'll all see it, Harris replied, at the board meeting tomorrow morning. The weight of that sentence landed like a hammer. Tomorrow the entire board would hear exactly why the founder trusted me more than his own blood. Margaret's face turned chalk white. Eleanor swallowed hard. Daniel sank onto the nearest chair. I rose, standing tall. For years, I said quietly, I let this family decide who I was, what I was worth, how loud I was allowed to speak. I looked directly at Margaret. But your husband saw me. He saw my mind, my work ethic, and my character. Then I turned to the room as a whole. And from now on, this house, this company, and this family will be built on respect. Not entitlement. Nobody argued. Nobody spoke. For the first time they listened. I walked toward the door, pausing in the doorway. There will be new rules. New expectations. And accountability. Real accountability. I glanced over my shoulder. Starting today. As I stepped out of the room, the weight of years finally lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't the helper. I wasn't the outsider. I was the owner. And tomorrow, the world would know exactly why. The next morning felt eerily calm. The kind of calm that only comes before a storm people don't realize is already upon them. I dressed carefully. Not extravagantly. Not to impress. But to declare a truth I had swallowed for too long. I belonged here. I always did. A navy blazer. A clean blouse. Hair pulled back. Not a single shaky breath. Daniel waited at the bottom of the stairs, restless, eyes red from a night of no sleep. You don't have to do this, he whispered. Yes, I said gently, I do. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He wasn't ready for a world where I didn't shrink to make him more comfortable. Margaret and Eleanor were already waiting by the front door, stiff with dread. Neither spoke to me. Not a glare. Not an insult. Not anything. They were too frightened of what their late patriarch might have said on that flash drive. We rode to the headquarters in dead silence. The Grant Industrial Freight Building loomed tall, steel and glass reflecting a sky that felt too bright for the chaos simmering underneath. Employees stood straighter when we entered. The usual hushed gossip died. Eyes widened. Some nodded respectfully, not to Margaret. Not to Daniel. To me. For the first time. Inside the boardroom, the directors were already seated. Some curious. Some confused. A few already aware something monumental was unfolding. Attorney Harris connected the flash drive to the projector. Margaret's nails dug into the table. Eleanor clutched a pen so tightly it could have snapped. Then the screen came alive. And there he was. Mr. Grant Sr. alive in a recording none of us knew existed. He sat behind his desk, eyes sharp but kind, voice steady. "If you're watching this," he began, "it means the transition is complete." Margaret let out a strained breath. He didn't pause for her. "I built this company from nothing. Not through privilege but through work. Through grit. Through patience with people who underestimated me." His gaze seemed to pierce straight through the screen. "And I've watched my family grow complacent. Confident that the business would be theirs simply because of their last name." Eleanor slumped lower in her seat. "But Amelia," he softened visibly. "Amelia has shown the integrity this company needs. She listens before she speaks. She studies before she decides. She treats every worker, from junior staff to senior partners, with dignity." Margaret's jaw clenched so tightly I thought her teeth might crack. "She has the values this company was founded on. Values I no longer see in my own blood." Daniel looked down, ashamed. Mr. Grant continued. "If they mock her, they mock the values I worked my entire life to preserve. If they dismiss her, they dismiss the very principles that built this empire. She is the only one I trust to protect what matters." Margaret broke. No, Thomas, how could you choose her over your family?" But the recording kept going. "And to my family, if you are upset by my decision, ask yourselves this. Did you earn the company? Or did you simply expect it?" Silence crashed through the boardroom. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, with finality that shook the air, "Amelia Grant is my successor. Protect her. Or stay out of her way." The screen faded to black. And that was it. The founder's words hung like a gavel's strike. No debate. No loopholes. No escape. The board turned to look at me, not with pity, not with skepticism, but with something resembling genuine respect. Attorney Harris asked, "Mrs. Grant, would you like to address the board?" I rose. Fully. Calmly. With the dignity they tried to deny me for so long. "Thank you," I said. "My priority is the company. Not revenge. Not humiliation." Margaret's head snapped toward me, hopeful. "But," I continued, "we will be making immediate changes." Her hope died again. I lifted a file from my bag. "Every department will undergo restructuring. Nepotism appointments will be reviewed. Performance will actually matter again." The room murmured in approval. I wasn't done. "And harassment, of any kind, will not be tolerated. Not in the office. Not in the home. Not anywhere." Eleanor swallowed hard. Daniel looked at the floor. Margaret recoiled like the words burned. I ended with, "This company deserves leadership that values every person who works here. That begins today." The board broke into applause. Genuine, thunderous applause. And for the first time the Grant family truly understood. I wasn't their servant. I wasn't their accessory. I wasn't their afterthought. I was the owner. The leader. The one the founder trusted more than any of them. After the meeting, as reporters clustered outside the building, microphones flashing, cameras rolling, I stepped forward. No fear. No shrinking. No apologies. Just purpose. "Mrs. Grant," a reporter shouted, "what message do you have for those who underestimated you?" I smiled. A small, steady smile. Never mistake silence for weakness. Flashbulbs erupted. And that was my final word. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another dramatic, twist-filled story. And share this video with someone who loves justice served cold.